Koga is probably one of my favorite characters in the realm, so like many people, I was really worried when the Sands of Myth update notes came out and I saw he was receiving all of these nerfs. As many of you guys know, I did advocate for Koga to get nerfed since he was overperforming, but I only ended up asking the devs to nerf his Trigger Happy card. And they did by quite a bit, but they also gave him several smaller nerfs in a lot of places. Smaller is definitely the key word here. While there were several nerfs, most of them were relatively small, especially when you compare them to the several very sizable buffs that he received back in the Tigron's Tail update. In the Sands of Myth update, he is still far more powerful than he was before Tigron's Tail, and he's still a really good character that can perform very well. A lot of players have moved away from Koga after seeing all of the nerfs, but the ones who have stayed with him and adapted to the nerfs are finding great success with him right now. The only difference between Koga from last update and this update is that he can't get away with as much as easily. In the Tigron's Tail update, he was able to get away with a lot with rather low effort. Pinning a good Koga down and killing him proved very difficult, so there was a major imbalance between the effort required to kill a Koga and the effort required to kill you. Now that gap is a lot closer together, and that's honestly a good thing, a great thing even. Koga is in a much healthier spot when he requires more thought and doesn't get to be so gung-ho for free. Now let's talk about how you can still succeed with Koga in the Sands of Myth update. I've been playing in normal public games as well as scrims as him, and I've been doing great with him still. In case you don't know what scrims are 5v5 custom games between two pre-made teams. Scrims are way more team-based and have a heavy focus on coordination. If you've ever seen pro play, it's a lot like that, but to a lesser degree because scrims are only practice. It's not as high level as pro play, but they're still normally played at a much higher level than any public game could offer. Due to the higher level of coordination, flanks are often weaker in scrims than public games, since teammates can call out flank positions. So if a flank is good in a scrim environment, then they're definitely good in a public game environment, and that's what really matters since that's the kind of environment most players play in. So let's talk about how to build Koga. It's not too different. Talent-wise, you're still going to want to pick Adrenaline Junkie. Yes, it did get nerfed a bit, but again, it's a small nerf. You only need to do 10 more damage than before to get more energy. It's definitely noticeable if you've played a lot of Koga, but it's not too big of a deal. Keep in mind, since it is dependent on the amount of damage you do, Wrecker is really good on Koga since it allows him to hurt barriers a lot and gain quick energy off of them. Koga is honestly the best flank to get Wrecker on, not only because of the increased energy gain, but also because he's a fast firing character with a lot of ammo. And that combo spells doom for barrier tanks. The combo also spells doom for unprotected tanks in general, since it allows you to not only melt their defensive option, but also melt them once that defensive option is down. As for loadouts, Koga has always been a character with a fair amount of diversity. It really depends on what your playstyle is. Normally you pick between a dash or agility centered build. For dash builds, you'll commonly see these cards. Tenacious at 4-5, since with a dash-focused build you'll be dashing around more often, so it makes sense to have that self-sustain backing up those dashes. Surprise at 4-5, since you can use your dashes to keep you from having to reload as often. Memento at 3-4, because having more base ammo pairs really well with the ammo regen, you can go a while without reloading. Something to Prove at 3 is a good card for dash builds, since it'll net you an emergency dash if you get low. Filler-wise, cards like Harsh Training and Swift Hands are good. Trigger Happy is also still a good card, but you need to run it at least level 4 for it to be valuable, and it's pretty hard to fit that in with all the other cards you need. If you dash while firing, it does amp the Tenacious heal, but I don't think it's enough of an amp to warrant running in a dash build anymore. Again, a lot of it is preference though. I'm not currently attempting to give you guys a full build, but I am listing the cards you guys would find valuable for said build. If you want to know what I personally run as a dash build, it's this. As for agility-centered builds, Memento at 3-4 is great here too. Wanted at 4-5 pairs really well with it in this case. Wind's Embrace at 3-5 is what would offer you your self-sustain here. You can amp that self-sustain with Trigger Happy 4. You're basically always firing and always in agility, so you're always getting an amped Wind's Embrace heal. For fillers, I'd run Raw Talent, Harsh Training, or swift hands. In case you're wondering what I personally run, I use this. Personally, I think agility builds are superior to dash ones. You get more out of the agility cards. Not a crazy amount more, but a noticeable amount. The downside is that you're using your agility more than you're dashing, so you're not always as invulnerable. I do still think it's better though, so if you're having difficulties picking what style to go with, I'd recommend agility. As far as items go, Cauterize is always great. If they have barrier tanks, Wrecker is great for the reasons I stated earlier. Life Rip is good if you're running trigger happy. Nimble is great to increase your speed by stacking it with agility. Master Riding is a fantastic item on flanks since it helps you get into their backline a lot faster. So now that you know how to build Koga, let's talk about how to play him. There are several ways to get value out of Koga. Depending on the enemy team comp, you could get value out of melting tanks. Again, barrier tanks don't like Wrecker Koga, and tanks in general don't like getting pelted by a barrage of bullets. Normally, tanks win 1v1s with a lot of the DPS characters by using certain cooldowns. Khan stuns with Commander's Grab, Makoa stuns and pulls with his hook, stuff like that. The thing about Koga is that he has dashes to avoid those things, and once they're avoided, he can freely farm the tanks. Most tanks don't have the damage required to contest him anymore. They rely on those abilities connecting. Honestly, I would say that farming tanks is what Koga ultimately gets the most value out of. At a high level, this is mainly why you would pick him. Another way to get value is by being a distracting nuisance. Koga can live for a long time, and if you're able to force the attention of an important target or several targets away from your team, then that makes a lot of space for your team to win the team fight. You don't even have to kill anything. As long as people are looking at you and not at the main fight, your team has the advantage. Now, fair warning, due to the realities of public play, you may not always get teammates who make use of the space that you create. So getting value by doing this is dependent on more than you, and it can vary. You can also, of course, flank normally. Koga has 3 methods of mobility to get around the map with, including vertical mobility from wall climbing, so he can get anywhere on any map. He's also naturally good at 1v1s due to his good damage output and his ability to outlive his enemies. He does struggle against duelists a bit, but when it comes to duelists who rely on a certain cooldown, like Leon with her presence combo or Cassie with her blast shot combo, Koga can predict those abilities and dash to avoid them, and at that point he can easily win the fight. Duelists who don't rely on a certain cooldown though, like Andro, are definitely a lot tougher to beat, and you want to avoid them unless they don't see you coming, or they're already weak. Now I do want to talk about his claws real quick, since there is a big skill gap with his claws. Many people don't know how to use them or don't use them at all, and you definitely want to know when to use them because they are a very powerful part of his kit. You don't want to be running around with your claws out for too long, because having them out makes you vulnerable since your only way out of the fight is with Skewer, and a Skewer has a wind-up time and takes all your energy. Mainly you want to swap to your claws to quickly burst down a lone target, then swap back before you get punished. Keep in mind that your claws don't have fall-off like your SMGs do, so you can burst targets from a distance as long as you're accurate and the situation calls for it. Another good time to use your claws is of course when you're out of ammo and need to finish off a target. Last thing I want to talk about with Koga is his ult. It's one of the weaker ults in this game and it's hard to get value out of, so normally people don't. But you can get value out of it if you're able to recognize when you can. Most characters have movement abilities and they can use these to easily get out of your ult. If you know a target just used their movement ability, then you can freely ult them. Sometimes you have to force the ability out of them, and with squishy targets, this is normally after they've lost half of their health. So at that point, you're better off killing them normally. If a tank's movement ability is forced out though, and they put a barrier up, you can dash past their barrier and ult them. If they're low, you get the kill. If they're not, you still get a ton of damage on them and your team can push through the barrier when they see you ulting. Also, ulting a Barrack while he's in his ult gets you a ton of value since Barrack can't stay in there. And ulting a Terminus when he's behind his Siphon at 3000 health or lower is valuable too. You can also ult a Terminus as he ults since you won't be hit by his ult and he'll basically be forced back down to 1000 health rather quickly. Also, I do want to point out that it isn't a bad thing to use your ultimate to live. If you're out of dashes and ulting could get you behind something or give your healer time to heal you, then do it. Alting to live is fine, because again, the ult isn't a super impactful one. It's also very possible that you can live while forcing the enemies that are after you to run away because they're afraid of getting caught in the ult. Another thing, ulting on an ally if something like a Drogos or a Bomb King ult is coming their way is worth it too. Your ult will either force them to cancel their ult or run away with it. Or they'll go into your ult, kill your teammate, but they'll also die for it, so you get a trade out of it. But yeah, Koga is still great. Just keep in mind you can't live through everything for free anymore, and play a bit safer and smarter with him. Use what you learned in this video on top of that as you adjust to the new Koga, and you'll be seeing success with him in no time. And yeah, that's pretty much it guys. I want to thank you all for watching, I very much appreciate it, and I'm gonna see you guys laters. Bye.